What is creation out of nothing? Is it nonsense, or is it a very solid thought? The discussion has something to do with the distinction between primary cause and secondary causes. Let's find out. We seem to be living in a world of cause and effect. A cause has an impact on the effect, and that effect becomes a new cause and has an impact on other causes and effects. This is a very simple way of portraying it. Actually, the connections are much more complicated and there are many interactions between causes and effects. So it's something like this. Let's simplify it again to this simple analogy. The first domino falls over and has an impact on all the other dominoes. If this were the timeline of our universe, then that first domino is for most people the Big Bang. The famous cosmologist Stephen Hawking said, because there is a law such as gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing. He actually said that through the Big Bang we eventually ended up in the world we are in now. The universe will create itself from nothing. Did I hear that right? I can't believe it. Let's find out. Impossible. Nothing can cause itself, let alone create itself. For something to create itself, it would have to exist before it came into existence, which is logically impossible. So let's get rid of that claim. It would be like this impossibility that Escher portrayed in one of his famous sketches. A hand that draws a hand cannot produce the very hand that does the drawing. That would be magic. It's impossible. That's what Escher is trying to say here. This is impossible. Nothing can cause itself or create itself. Actually, nothing comes from nothing. Yet we live in a world of law and order. Like causes have like effects. All scientists will adhere to that. How come? The answer is probably laws of nature. They make sure that like causes have like effects. Where do those laws come from? Where does gravity, the law of gravity, come from? Where do the laws of nature come from? Why is there something rather than nothing? If these are the events, then Miller's law would say all events depend on some law. But these events and these laws, they could easily not have existed. The reason for their existence cannot be found within themselves. So some people take them just as a given. But that is a very irrational solution. We have to conclude that the universe cannot explain itself. The explanation has to come from somewhere else. What is the cause behind all these causes? The philosophical terminology for these causes is that they are called secondary causes. Where do these secondary causes come from? What is the cause behind all of them? And the philosophical term is the primary cause makes all these secondary causes possible. It is the framework in which these secondary causes reside, the framework in which we live and move and have our being. Please don't take this the wrong way. The primary cause is not the beginning of this chain of secondary causes. It is its origin. It's not the first cause in a sense of a secondary cause at the beginning of the chain of secondary causes. So what is the primary cause and what is it not? First of all, it is uncaused. The primary cause does not have a cause itself. But it's not self-caused. Nothing can cause itself, as we have seen so far. It is the origin of the chain of secondary causes, not the beginning of the chain. It's not the first in line of the secondary causes. It is at the origin of all of them. It is a point of suspension for the chain, not another part of the chain. It's transcendent to all secondary causes. It's of a different level, so it's not a cause prior to or larger than all other causes. It is from a different level. It is the source and ground of all being, not some kind of super being among other beings, but the source of all being. It is part of everything in this universe without being a physical part of our universe. Because the primary cause is not a physical part, God could never be discovered among the secondary causes. For the primary cause is not one of them. So no matter how long we keep staring into the sky, into the universe, we will never discover God. Or take this case, the Grand Canyon. How was the Grand Canyon carved out? By a secondary cause, the Colorado River. And yet it was created by God as a primary cause. In a similar way, our universe started through the Big Bang, which is a secondary cause. It did not come from the Big Bang, but it came from creation. But through the Big Bang, the universe could get started. Just like we all came through our parents, and yet we came from God. God is the primary cause of our existence. Our parents are the secondary causes of our existence. Without them we would not exist. But without God we wouldn't exist either. This brings us to the issue, creation out of nothing. What does that mean? When Judeo-Christians speak of creation out of nothing, they are certainly not talking science. Science is about producing something from something else. But creation is about creating something from nothing. What is the difference? Thomas Aquinas made this distinction centuries ago. He said there is creating and there is producing. The Creator creates the world. He makes something from nothing. A potter, on the other hand, produces something. He makes something from something else. Please, let's keep that distinction always clear. Let's keep that in mind constantly. The Big Bang was created from nothing, so it could produce something else. What is nothing? Nothingness is not a very exotic kind of stuff. It is not an element that has not found a position yet in the periodic system. It is in no way a material thing that can change into something else. It is not a special kind of something, it is actually the absence of anything. Plenty of nothing is still nothing. So you cannot make anything out of nothing. You cannot produce it unless you are the primary source who can create something. Creation is not a change from nothing to something. It is the reason why there is something rather than nothing, including something such as the law of gravity and all the other laws, and even the law that says that every event depends on some law. This also holds for the discussion on evolution and creation. Evolution offers us a scientific account of how one thing changed into another thing. It's about producing something. It is completely based on secondary causes. That's all science can handle. Creation, on the other hand, is a metaphysical account of where the material world itself comes from. Why does it exist? How come it exists? So it refers to the first cause. So that brings us to another important distinction. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. Don't take that as at the beginning. At the moment we talk about at the beginning, we are in the world of secondary causes. But the calendar had to be created first. Time itself is a product of creation. Albert Einstein showed us that both time and space are part of the physical world. So creation creates time. It is not itself on a timeline. Thomas Aquinas had said it already decades ago when he said, before the world there was no time. Creation creates time, and at the moment there is time, we are talking about at the beginning. Creation is something in the beginning, which makes it possible for things to happen at the beginning once there is a timeline. In other words, creation is not an act in time, but it keeps all things in existence at all times. Creation is the origin of the universe, in the beginning. So when you ask me what happened at the beginning, we have to go to science. Science can deal with secondary causes. It cannot deal with the primary cause. It must assume them, I would say, but it can never discover it. What happened at the beginning? The Big Bang is the beginning of the universe, but not the origin of the universe. Nothing can create itself. And after the Big Bang, eventually evolution kicked in as the unfolding of the universe. That is science. Let me use a poor analogy. Analogies are always dangerous, but let me try. This old-fashioned grandfather's clock has an intricate mechanism of cogs, springs and wheels. They all work in a network of cause and effect, secondary causes. However, the clock will stop ticking if there is not someone who keeps winding up the clock from outside the system. This person is not another cog, spring or wheel inside the system, but it comes from outside the system. Isn't that weird? Yes and no. Maybe I can use an analogy. If this woman says that all males are liars, that can be true or false. But if this man says all males are liars, we have a real problem. If he tells us the truth, then not all males are liars. If he is lying, then it's not true. So we have a real problem. This is called the paradox of something that you could rephrase as a list of all lists that do not contain themselves is either incomplete, if it does not list itself, or it is incoherent if it does list itself. That's the famous paradox. That paradox has been actually worked on mathematically by the famous Kurt Gödel. He proved in his incompleteness theorem that no coherent system, not even the system of science, can be completely closed. Any coherent system is in essence incomplete and needs additional help from outside the system. He actually went as far as believing that we can't give a credible account of reality without invoking God as a primary cause from outside the system. There is much more to this. I discussed this issue and many others in my book Of All That Is Seen and Unseen, published by Queenship Publishing Company. It has much more than what we discussed here. The yellow section has parts of our discussion, but there is much more, as you can see. In the yellow section I go much more extensively into this discussion, because it requires more time to explain everything. In another book, A Destiny of the Universe, I do this part also. It's published by Paragon House. In chapter 3, I discuss this kind of issues and much more, and the book has many other discussions that you might be interested in.